Hello! From the Next Reels Film Board, this is Tommy Handsome with an important announcement. The following podcast includes movie audio clips that contain unbleeped profanity. Such profanity may include damn, hell, nuts, butter, McGee, doodle, Captain Fuck, and toot toot, here comes the diarrhea parade. Listening discretion is advised.
Welcome to Trailer Rewind, a monthly conversation about movies you may have missed in theaters that are now available to watch at home on streaming services. Every month, we dig into the archives and watch a film that was one of the trailer picks on a Saturday matinee episode. You can get access to the SatMat shows by supporting us at patreon.com/thenextreel. And you can also get to be part of our group on Discord, where there's always an engaging conversation about films. JJ, we're talking about one of your favorite movies tonight.
Yay! Palate cleanser.
Yes.
After a few months of scary nonsense,
Yes.
it's time we bring the beauty back to the masses.
There we go. We're going to talk about I, Tonya. This was Andy's pick from November 4th, 2017. Today is March 6th, 2019, and I, Tonya is currently available on Hulu.
The haters always say, Tonya, tell the truth. There's no such thing as truth. Everyone has their own truth.
I was the best figure skater in the world at one point in time.
Call that a clean skate? Stop talking to her. That girl is your enemy.
This one, tracking, its whole release plan. I think this one was one of those scheduled for limited release, getting into the Oscars, Oscar eligibility. So it was released into U.S. theaters as a limited release on December 8th, 2017, and went wide about a month later, January 19th, 2018. It stayed in theaters until April, taking in $30 million in the U.S. and another $23 million internationally. Showed up on...
Yeah, it surprised people, I think.
Oh, it did. It was available digitally on iTunes March 2nd, and then hit Blu-ray March 13th, and Hulu a couple months later on May 30th. So it's been out there on Hulu for nearly a year now.
See, and I think you think maybe this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us on Trailer Rewind, because a lot of times we talk about on this show that we want to do movies that people might have missed, and maybe people didn't miss this movie as much because also it has the Oscar buzz and things like that. But the people that did in that big group of Oscar nominations, the people that didn't see this movie because it didn't win Best Picture, so I want to make sure I'm really happy we're talking about it because I want to give it what it's due from our show, because I think it's a really special movie, and I'm glad we're going to talk about it today.
Well, I think this is one that has that potential to be overlooked. There was probably a lot of people looking for it, after the Oscars, Allison Janney winning, Best Supporting Actress for this, but that was over a year ago, and it could have fallen off of everybody's radar. It's an unusual film, and we'll get into that. But this is one that I wanted to, post 2019 Oscars, bring back up as a reminder for people to revisit a film that I think deserves a lot more attention than it's getting. This is my third time seeing it, and it gets better every single time. And I'm seeing more and more to it. It is a really, really solid film. So I agree. This is one that typically we try to pluck things out of obscurity, but here I don't want to say this is an obscure film, but I fear that it has fallen off of people's radars, and I want to use this as a platform to encourage them, go see this movie again.
Yeah, I think so. When I'm looking through the 2018 nominees, it doesn't look like it was nominated for Best Picture. I guess I was wrong about that. It was only nominated for acting awards. So that, and that year, who won? The Shape of Water won?
Yes.
I guess there's a lot of good movies in this bunch, but from my standpoint, I think I, Tonya is better than them all. So, get out and watch it if you missed it.
Well, back in December 2017, when Andy picked this as his trailer, he said he had heard about this, but had completely forgotten about it. He said the trailer looks totally bonkers, but that was, of course, the Red Band trailer, which can get a little bonkers.
Sure.
And
it's the purpose.
And interestingly enough, he said he wasn't that familiar with the whole story about Tonya Harding, but the trailer got him interested in this movie. And then he mentioned that he hoped I would enjoy it, even though it was directed by Craig Gillespie, who directed one of my quote unquote favorite movies of the previous year, The Finest Hours, which we discussed on the film board. And there were many mixed feelings about that film. And I had completely forgotten.
Mostly negative.
Yes.
Let's be honest.
Yes.
They were mostly negative.
Yes. But I had completely forgotten that Craig Gillespie directed both of these films because they are such polar opposites. You have Finest Hours, which is your sort of Disney, family-ish, not quite for young kids. It does get quite intense, but very typical.
But it's a feel-good natural disaster rescue story thing.
And this is the exact opposite of that, a very unconventional storytelling structure. It is very much not appropriate for the entire family. It's darkly comic. So I looked at Mr. Gillespie's IMDb. I have not seen, and it's been on my list to see, Lars and the Real Girl, which was back in 2007 with Ryan Gosling.
It's quite good.
So I may have to revisit that. But yeah, $1 Million Arm. Again, there's Disney with John Hamm, the pitching movie. Yeah. But then Fright Night, the remake of Fright Night, that horror movie from the mid 80s. So what
an interesting mix.
Yes, and he's
really varied.
And he's coming back into the Disney camp again. It has been announced now, of course, whether that comes to fruition, we will see. But a film called Cruella, which is a live action prequel about a young Cruella de Vil. So it almost seems like he's one of these directors that's I'll do one for Disney, I'll do one for me type of platform. I
like that concept. Yes. I don't know if it's real, but I like that concept.
But for him it is. He's apparently got a good relationship with Disney, and he'll do one for them every once in a while, and then he'll do something else. Because I would say Lars and the Real Girl, from what I know about it, not Disney fare. And as we'll discuss tonight, I, Tonya, definitely not Disney,
No, not at all.
So why do you love this movie so much?
Well, I love it for a lot of reasons, and we're going to talk about a lot of them on the show. But my number one reason is that my background in my career was that I was a reporter for a little more than 13 years. In a couple different markets, and I was on local TV news. But the background that it comes from is journalism. My undergraduate degree is in journalism, and a lot of times we talk about when we come to a movie that is a story or that is a depiction of a true story, we talk about what's real and what's not. And my favorite thing about this movie, and I think it does it better than any movie I've ever seen in my life, is that it doesn't try to explain what really happened. It takes what we know from this really fantastic, and I mean that in the way of like a fantasy story, that people didn't believe when it was really happening. The incident, as they call it in the movie, when Nancy Kerrigan got bludgeoned. There's all these different stories, and there are media accounts of the stories, but what this movie is made of is the different personal accounts of what happened. And at no point does it try to say that what someone said was the truth and what someone said was a lie. It constantly says, this is her account. This is what she said. This is these sort of things. And it has characters tell us this was a lie. It has characters tell us she really did this. It says these things, but it's always from the character's voice. And the amount of journalistic integrity in telling a based on a true story movie like this felt so accurate, felt so special because it at no point did it point at me and say, this is the narrative that I want to tell. Instead, what it seemed to do, and there's probably accounts of where it maybe messed up the point here too, is that it seemed to gather everyone's opinion. It seemed to gather everyone's story associated with this, and then gave it a little bit of play and allowed you to kind of, as an audience member, sit back and decide what you believed with it. And I think it does romanticize the story in some ways. It does make it seems, if you're taking a first person account of some of the people's stories in it, it makes them feel a little bit more sympathetic figures. But it wasn't a problem. It showed all of the great drama and great real sort of craziness, almost a soap opera style drama of what led up to this particular crazy incident from Olympic history. And I think it was perfectly told, and in such an artful way. But that journalistic integrity piece, that thing of saying, we're not forcing you to believe our truth. We're going to just give you what everybody's truth was and let them tell you that they think they're lying. It took the unreliable narrator concept to a new level and did it in a perfect way. And that's why I love this movie so much.
Well, speaking of news and journalism and media, one moment that I find particularly, the filmmakers took to leverage, they have this character played by Bobby Cannavale, the hard copy reporter, who basically says, all the news stations made fun of us before they became us. And hard copy, and you look at the trajectory of news, and what hard copy was at that time is, you can look back 25 years, distant and say, this is what news has become, what they used to mock.
Yes.
Gives a certain perspective and tell about this film of reflecting back on the past and what seemed crazy then. And this is sort of what I think makes this an interesting story to revisit 25 years later, of how insane things were then. To tell it this way, would this stand out nowadays? Would this seem as crazy because we didn't have anything like this back in 1994? Is this, become the norm for the news cycles, where this was really this standout story? So it's for me, an interesting reflection on where we've come in terms of media, because he even talks about, now I believe he's sort of a composite character, but he talks about the fact that they would have Tonya's car towed or flatten her tires to get her out there to
right, just to get a picture,
and you think of what journalists do nowadays to get the story, to get the picture.
I'll tell you, there's a reason why I'm not in the news anymore.
Yes.
Well, there's many, but that's that's definitely one of them. That it was definitely a tough and cynical business for sure.
So an interesting bit of research as I was getting ready for this, there were two things that I came across. One was that Margot Robbie, who was born in 1990, because she was 4 when the incident happened, she wasn't really familiar with this story, and claims that when she read the script, she didn't really understand that this was based on true events. This can't.
Would you?
Right.
How could you imagine that this could possibly be true?
And it's hard as somebody that remembers this. And my wife, when she was in high school, in the 80s, had lots of friends that were into skating. So for her, watching, Olympic figure skating was very much something she was tuned into. So this occurred just shortly after we were married. So this was something we were really interested in and aware of. So for me to think of someone not knowing this story is, at first it makes me feel a little old. But it again goes back to that news cycle of things can be, top headlines, and then it fades away 5 years later and is forgotten.
And I will say that people ask me around here, I'm in Portland, Oregon. People ask me around here, what are you doing for Trailer Rewind this month? And I told them, well, we're doing Tonya, and it's like everybody saw it here because it was the biggest thing around here. I mean, Tonya going to the Olympics was a major deal. People around here had been watching her skate for decades. So it's a big deal to people here, even though, and Margot Robbie's from the other side of the world, but it really, it's kind of regionalized the story as well.
Yes. And it's, so the other piece in doing my research, and I'll put the link in the show notes, and because it's available on Hulu, there's a 1986 documentary called Sharp Edges, which to me is a really fitting title because this is a Yale student making a documentary about then unknown Tonya Harding. She was 15 years old. And I guess she was out in New York for nationals and just happened to be picked as the skater that filmmaker Sandra Luckow followed for seems like about a year. And much of the footage in this documentary was the foundation for I, Tonya. So the interviews with mom, her mother wearing a fur coat with a little bird on her shoulder.
Yeah.
That's there.
It's a real interview.
The interview with her coaches. Now they changed up the sets, but there's a lot of footage of, her coach. They're sitting on the couch and talking about this. They have lots of footage of Tonya skating and interviewing 15-year-old Tonya.
Did you watch the whole documentary?
Yes. Yeah, I watched it. It's about 45 minutes long. So is there an actual interview of Tonya in the kitchen? No,
okay.
So
and then the Jeff Galooly interview with him on the chair, that's fictionalized for the movie.
That's all later. Yeah. They based everything
so weird
else. Yeah.
Because that documentary footage of Levana with the bird made me, after I saw the first movie, I was so impressed with the fact that there were true ones that I had created in my mind that both the two that I mentioned, the Tonya interview in the kitchen and the Galooly interview on the chair with the boom mic that comes down at the beginning, I had created in my mind that those were real interviews too.
Now, those may also be because there is another documentary that ESPN did called I think it's called The Price of Gold, which is available on Amazon to rent, but I did not have time to watch that. So that was in, I want to say 2014 documentary about that. So those pieces may have been based because that would have been, 20 years after the incident to interview, Tonya and Jeff. So it could be based on those pieces. But what's really interesting about Sharp Edges, there's a part where her mom, Levana, basically says, Tonya won't do something unless you push her by telling her she can't do it, which is something that I think they pulled that line, maybe modified a little bit, and gave it to her in a different context. Because we do have that scene where they're at one of the competitions, there's a guy just heckling her from the stands, and then you see mom paying the guy off. But her mom actually says that in Sharp Edges of, if you just were to leave her to do stuff on her own, she probably wouldn't do anything. But if you tell her she can't do it, it motivates her to push herself to prove you wrong.
See, and that reminded me of Whiplash. About the J.K. Simmons character in Whiplash and how he takes pride in his ability to break people down and get the best out of them. And I love both these movies. So I think that's really interesting. This one is a whole lot more, sort of disparaging in terms of the real life aspect of it versus the completely fiction story that is in Whiplash. But that same sort of thing of these people that really are abusers, but taking pride in their abuse as creating some product that is greatness. That it's just such a weird and, to my mind, evil sort of attitude to take to any life situation.
Oh yeah, and the documentary does. There's a couple scenes with Tonya. They're just interviewing. She's talking about her family. There's one point where she talks about a brother and sister, I'm assuming older. So we don't see those characters in I, Tonya, but just, her sister that I think got arrested and then ran off to live with some guy in Hawaii. It's clear that she's coming out of a really dysfunctional family. And then there's a scene later on after one of the competitions and she calls mom. And you only get Tanya's side of the conversation, but you could, then the interviewer asks her, what's wrong? Because Tonya basically says some crude things about her mom after getting off the phone, like, "Oh, she is such a bitch." And I'm like, well, what did she say? And she, basically is sharing the criticism that she got from her mom because she only took sixth, and mom had already heard that she missed one landing or made a mistake and just ripped into her over the phone about how she's not good enough and all this. And You see that in I, Tonya, but it's to me different to see that dramatization is rooted in actual factual evidence. I can see in that documentary that the true dysfunction of the relationship between mother and daughter, the poverty that she came out of. I think she talks about her brother getting caught for stealing things. And this is a 15-year-old girl who's had to deal with all of this. So to me, it just really helped solidify for me what I noted most about this film, sort of the third time around, which is really looking at Tonya Hardy not as, to me, separate from the incident. What her journey in quest was. Things get sidetracked by the incident, but what trajectory was she on, and what were the struggles that she had on there? And early on in the film, we get a scene when she and Jeff start dating, and this is about 15 minutes in, and we get a montage that just shows this cycle of abuse that is at the core of their relationship.
Sing the streets a serenade, laying everybody low.
He was really sweet in the beginning. And he was a good kisser. He told me he loved me, and I believed him.
You're not having a conversation. You're just fucking yelling at me.
Hey!
But then he started hitting me a few months in.
I'm sorry.
Then he would say it would never happen again, but I figured my mom hits me, she loves me. And I thought it was my fault. That's just what I knew.
Touch me!
He'd say he was sorry, then things would be normal for a while.
I'm sorry.
He was the first boy I ever loved. The only catch was
He beat the living hell out of me. And I thought it was my fault.
Nancy gets hit one time.
Why?
And the whole world shits. For me, it's an all-the-time occurrence.
I never hit her. That's not me. I'm actually a pretty meek guy. He hit me, cracked the wallet, fired a gun at me too.
This is bullshit. I never did this.
That comes later.
So, JJ, I bring up that scene not only because we get the abuse, and I think that's something that just really speaks to the world that she's growing up in and trying to escape from, but keeps finding herself drawn back to. We see her, she and Jeff, throughout the movie, they split up, they get back together. It's this, she's drawn to the abuser, but she's also got an abusive mother. But what really strikes me about this montage is that it does something really unique stylistically, because early on we get the setup of, we're doing interviews. We're doing these face-to-face interviews with Tonya, with Jeff, with her mother. They're sitting down, and that audio from that interview is often overlaid over scenes we see, which technically would be flashbacks. We're seeing things in the past and they're commenting on them. However, in this montage, we get scenes where Tonya will get that voiceover commentary, and then she will look directly into the camera, speak to us, the audience, break that fourth wall to comment on that. And that's where we get.
And I love that.
We get that scene with the where Jeff talks about her being abusive, and it's in the trailer where she, he's like, and she even shot at me, and she's cocking that shotgun, and she's like, "This, I never did this," commenting on his flashback. Yes.
And this is the thing. It's to break the fourth wall and to tell us in the audience how, from the character's point of view, and it's not even a character because these are real people, to tell their story, breaking the fourth wall. It's just, to me, it feels brilliant. To me, it feels like an insight that I hadn't seen before, in a way of telling a true life story and having them break out and say, this is my version of events. And then having another character immediately contradict it in the next scene. I just thought it was brilliant. And it was the kind of rule-breaking idea for something, again, where the subject matter is real, that made this a really artful movie for me.
Now, I've seen that done once before.
Oh, where did you see it?
So there's a Michael Winterbottom film from 2002 called 24-Hour Party People, which is about
I have no idea what that is.
So it's a movie about the Manchester music scene in like the 80s and 90s. And
okay, yeah, I'm looking it up. Steve Coogan. That's
Steve
cool.
Coogan plays a character named Tony Wilson. And so there's this scene in the movie where Steve Coogan as Tony Wilson is in the bathroom at a club and, I don't know, involved with a woman in one of the bathroom stalls. And the camera pans right, and there is the actual Tony Wilson. And it says, subtitle comes and says, Tony Wilson. He's like, I don't remember this happening at all. so to not only have the actual, breaking the fourth wall, but having the actual person that's being portrayed in the movie comment on what the movie is saying about him, Tonya reminded me very much of that moment.
Super interesting.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with that. That's great. 24-hour party people.
Yes. If you love the sort of Manchester music scene, they track the band's New Order, Happy Mondays, and a couple others in that mid to late 80s scene. Tremendous movie. If you can find it out there streaming or rent it, I will highly recommend it because of that.
Excellent.
Same style of breaking the fourth wall, having characters comment on what's going on directly to the audience.
Very nice.
So the style of the movie, it's about 15 minutes in where we get that sort of shift. And I think Tonya was following along with a somewhat traditional story, but once we get to that breaking the fourth wall, it's giving me these clues that this film is going to go into some unconventional territory. So
and one of my favorite points where they break the fourth wall is where Tanya's having that kitchen interview. This is late in the film, but that we've used it. We're now familiar with it. We've had lots of the characters talking to us throughout the film, and she talks about how, and she says directly to the audience, and you are my abusers.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this is the thing where, I in my mind, that kitchen interview, I had created that it was real, but in my second view, now I own the movie. I actually bought it on Vudu for this purpose. But I went, oh yeah, no, that didn't happen because Tonya didn't say that. But what a great commentary from the screenwriter and from the movie itself to say, all of us in the world that we're consuming this media frenzy, we are the abusers because we allowed these tools to inflict additional abuse on Tonya. I just thought that was really powerful. And that was the most powerful use of that fourth wall break. And again, talking about the cycle of abuse that you were talking about as well.
Oh, yeah. And we even get, there's a scene later on when Jeff confronts her at like a motel she's staying at, and they have a whole fight there. She leaves. He shoots her. She gets grazed by a bullet. Yeah. They get in the car. They get pulled over by the police. And she says there's like a gun in the trunk. There's like liquor bottles in the car. And the cop does nothing. It's clear that she's been beaten up and nothing happened. And to me, it's this, again, on a third viewing, now separating myself from, I think first viewing is just coping with, wow, this is really unconventional storytelling. I'm having fun with this. Look at how comical this is. Look at how ridiculous this is. Second viewing to sort of just focus on character. Third viewing, looking at what they're really saying about the abuse she's receiving and that everybody in her world just look the other way.
Yeah.
And it's like you look at what this does to a young woman growing up, trying to make a life for herself to get out of this, and there is nobody there. The law enforcement you think would be the people to step in, just look the other way. And I just wasn't anything that, again, I think I was so caught up in the, wow, this is so ridiculous. I can't believe, the world is like this, to, oh my gosh, I can't believe the world is like this. We have to do something about this. This should not be allowed to happen to young women, that they are abused like this and people look the other way.
Right. And now you look at, everything that's happened with USA Gymnastics in the last year, and that's all come out after this movie, but there's a lot of crap out there going on that people need to pay attention to.
Yes. And, for her, it was, I think she had visions of what success was going to be like. And after she wins that first championship, and then they get in the big fight about why she can't have Dove bars. They go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
She's like, "Where's my Dove bar?" She's like, "Look, I'm like the national champion. I should have Dove bars." He's like, "We can't afford it. You got Eskimo pies. It's, just as good." And they end up in this fight about this. And it's, for her, you have to think everything is set up early on for the struggle she has of, she's got to dress right. And so it's like, she's got to have a fur coat. So dad takes her out hunting and they kill a bunch of rabbits and she's wearing this like really mangy, like rabbit coat because, well, she's got to have a fur coat and mom's going to make sure she has that fur coat, but they can't afford that. But they'll do what they can. And so it's just this continuous battle for her to try to fit in. And for me, the scene that really captures this is it's after the 92 Olympics and she's just found out her coach has come back and found her and said, "Hey, look, they just decided they're not going to do the Olympics every 4 years. It's every 2 years. So you've got a shot coming up."
Which is amazing that happened.
Yes, at that time for her.
At this time in history. Yes. Yeah, it's crazy.
So she's going through training and during that training montage, it's so fitting with, Pete and Andy being in the Rocky series that they're doing, where there's that scene of her. She's running with the big bag of dog food, and the coach turns to the camera and says, "Oh yeah, she really Tonya says, "Oh yeah, this is how Rocky trained in Rocky 4." And the coach turns to the camera and said, "Yes, she really did this." And then she's tumbling logs. Yes, she really did that. But she gets to a competition, and it's probably I think somewhere in '93. And things don't go well, and she confronts one of the judges in the parking garage.
Hey, excuse me. Sir? Excuse me. Sir, can I talk to you for a second? Just about my score?
Happy to.
I know that you guys don't like me, but I'm landing all my jumps out there.
Tonya, it's never been entirely about the skating. I'll deny I ever said it, honey, but you're just not the image that we want to portray. You're representing our country, for fuck's sake. We need to see a wholesome American family, and you just refuse to play along.
I don't have a wholesome American family. Why can't it just be about the skating? They want a wholesome American family?
Fuck you, give me that.
Well, it's not going to be easy, but yeah, I could pull that out of my ass.
And for me, this gets at the root of one of the challenges of becoming a sports celebrity. She said several times, why can't it just be about skating? But being a celebrity, being successful, it's also about image. It's not just talent alone. You've got to carry that responsibility of being a public figure. And what I realized this time watching it, where skating could have been her escape, it was her way out of, the horrible relationship she was in, poverty. This was her way out to live a different life. And all the judges were basically saying, you may be the best, sure, you may be good, but you're not the right type of girl. You don't represent America. You don't represent a wholesome family. So her way out just became this wall and reminder that she was going to be stuck, that there was no American dream for her. She was a victim of her circumstances, and skating was not going to allow her to escape that.
And in the second watching of this, and I remember feeling this a little bit when I watched it the first time too, but there are so many cues in the movie, and I don't know if they do this on purpose, but there's so many cues in the movie that let us know as the audience, and potentially are potential flags for Tonya as well, that if she hadn't pursued this dream, her life might have been easier and more simple. That this dream, while it was her ticket away from what she perceived as a negative thing, she had a bunch of different talents and abilities that if she just would have leaned into, it would have been better. I think of early on, I think when she's even 15 and she's dating Jeff Gooley for the first time, he's trying to fix his car and she knows way more about the car than he does at all.
Yes.
And goes in and just fixes it for him. This is a thing. And then, there's this perception that the working as a server is, she says, I ended up just like my mom. I'm a server, and then you talk about that moment where the coach comes up to her and says, oh, well, they're going to do the Olympics every 2 years. If she hadn't bought into that dream again, then potentially she would have had an easier life, but it would have been out of the spotlight and it would have been away from that ticket that you mentioned, that ticket out of there. And so it's the perception of the reality. She had talents. She had other things she could have done well, but this allure and this thing that she could do that nobody else could do before her, no one else in the world could do before her, was too much temptation to walk away from, because she had the potential to be the best in the world. And it's a really interesting cautionary tale in that respect as well.
Well, she says after when we've got that kitchen interview, and she says, after that, I knew that I was the best skater in the world.
Yeah.
At that time, for that time,
right.
One time, I was the best skater in the world. And I think that's great. But what does that get you? It doesn't get you away from the abusive husband. It doesn't get you, all the money, because you've got to be that personality. And she even comments on it later on where, she often says she roomed with Nancy, and it shows them like both chugging beer, but the press wanted, the good girl and the bad girl. And so they played
I don't know if that's
up.
true, though.
I don't know
that's one of those unreliable narrator points
definitely.
Where I don't know. And I'm not saying it, I'm not jumping to Nancy Kerrigan's defense with that. I just am trying to say that's one of those things that feels like not an embellishment, but a little bit of a exaggeration on the point of the narrator to make people feel more sympathetic to the narrator.
Oh, definitely. Because I think, Tonya, talented skater, because even in Sharp Edges, her mother talks about the fact that, she started skating when she was like 3 or 4. So, lifetime of working at this and pure talent, but, not always picking the right music and not the right costumes. Yeah. And you think about a system that doesn't celebrate talent, but only talent when combined with the right image. And I think of
it's politics.
Oh, it is. I remember back in the early 90s, living outside the suburbs of Chicago Bulls, and looking at, Dennis Rodman. And I think, here's a guy who was a talented basketball player who is now in the public media and now has to be a role model for kids. And what pressure is that? Like, I just want to play basketball and be good at this, but now I can't make mistakes. I have to be this perfect role model, and the pressure of that. And I think we see that here with, Tonya Harding. I just want to skate and I want to be the best skater, but you're expecting me to be these other things. You want me to come from a wholesome family. I don't have that. So you're saying that even though I'm the best skater, because I don't have these other things, you won't recognize my talent. And to me, that's the complex, that's the system that she became victim to. And it's a shame that talent alone will never be enough, for the world to recognize people. And to me, that's the big picture that really came through this third time, particularly with women, because there's been a lot of, reflection now on women that are successful, how they're characterized. Of like, they've got to be cold-hearted if they're successful. Whereas men, it's a different standard. But women, they've got to be, a certain type of woman to be successful, because they can't be, clearly they can't be nice and friendly because they can't be successful in the world that way. And all these, different standards that we have for men and women, how do you manage to have kids and be successful in your career? But they don't ask men those questions and these different standards.
Yep.
And I'm probably more focused on this because I've got 2 teenage daughters, and I'm thinking about their entry into the, world outside of, getting outside of school and having to make their way, and how they're going to be evaluated and judged isn't going to be just solely on their talent, but are they the right type of girl? And that's really upsetting to me.
So, okay. So your daughters are how old?
16 and 18.
So how do you feel? And obviously, this is a very raw movie, but how would you feel about presenting this to them to let them know about greatness and how the pursuit of greatness is filled with really scary sort of things?
Well, I think it's better to go in informed rather than to, so, and I think Emma, my 16-year-old, I don't know if she saw all of I, Tonya the second time I watched it. I think she may have seen bits and pieces because, again, she doesn't have the historical perspective.
Sure.
But I think both of them, because, well, we watch a lot of movies here, are going to be engaged because, as we said, the unconventional storytelling structure to this is just so entertaining. This is a movie that, so many biopics, you're like, okay, yeah, I get the typical, trajectory. This is so different. This one, I don't think either of them are going to have an issue sitting down and enjoying. But yeah, I think it will be worth having a discussion to look at, what happened with Tonya and why she wasn't successful, and ultimately what happens to her. Ended up boxing. We see that at the end. She's in the boxing ring because that's, again, that's where she is. I think we get at the end of the film, we get some little updates on everybody. She's not in touch with her mother. She's doing like landscaping, happily married,
right, in Washington.
Yeah, not far from Jeff, but he's married, doing his own thing. But they're not in touch or contact with each other. So
it's a very normal story now, right? And I think that everyone should see this, because if you do know the story, if you lived through the media circus that was this story in those years, it's going to be interesting and it's going to be informative to get everybody else's take on it. And it's going to teach you something new about that story. Whether or not it's true, you're going to learn more aspects of it than you would have definitely learned from the media. And if you didn't know about the story, this is a really interesting look to say, wow, how could that really be possible? You brought up at the beginning, Steve, that when Margot Robbie looked at the script, it didn't seem like it was something that was real because she was only 4 when it happened. I think that tells the story that this really needs to be seen. One other thing that I want to say about it is that we haven't talked a lot about camera, and I don't know. Need to go too far in depth about it, but there are so many innovative camera shots to this movie, and that alone, plus the great story or the innovative storytelling, is why I think this should have been at least a Best Picture nominee. Because there's 2 shots that I'd like to bring up in particular. There's one when she's just about to start one of her routines on the ice, where the camera is placed basically on the ice looking up at Tonya, and she's center frame looking down directly into the camera, and you just have the ceiling and all it is Tonya. And I think it's perfect to show her determination and everything that all those quiet moments that, no one really knew. No one really even thought about when they were thinking about the media circus. I think that's one of the beauties of this story, is that it really humanizes Tonya as a person. And then the other shot is this sort of faked oneer that's in the house when Jeff is without Tonya. Jeff is alone and is no longer with Tonya. You see him go through 2 or 3 different it's sort of things in time to show passage of time in the house. At one point he's on the phone. At one point he's in the bedroom. He last then sort of slumps down into the living room, and the camera's moving around through this whole reason. The reason why it's faked is because he's in different outfits. So they did have cuts through this, but the camera gives you the impression that it's moving around in one continuous movement. And then as he slumps down into the living room, the camera pulls out of the living room through the open door in the front of the house, and then speeds down the street away from him to show Jeff being alone and separate from Tonya. It's just, it was really beautiful camera work, and it's the kind of stuff that I love seeing in film, and that kind of stuff needs to be rewarded in some way or another. And that we did see that this movie won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar with Allison Janney, who did a wonderful, wonderful job. Margot Robbie was nominated but didn't win, and I think didn't Frances McDormand win for
3 Billboards.
3 Billboards, which I haven't seen that movie, but she's fantastic too. I just think Margot Robbie's performance here was really, really special. And I think there's other things about this movie that need to be rewarded too. And that's why I think everybody should see it.
Oh yeah. And then whenever I watch this, I look at Sebastian Stan as Jeff and think, that's the Winter Soldier. I'm like, How I don't see that. I cannot see Bucky in there.
A great acting job, right? I mean, honestly,
it's the mustache. It is so much the mustache. Yes, and there. I mean, just the comedy of errors of everything that happens when we start to get to the incident. But for me, and the movie runs close to 2 hours, and we get so much of Tonya's story as the setup to the incident. And that part of the incident becomes, the comedy of errors, and that's really interesting, and I'm familiar with that. But for me, it is really all the character pieces up front that are really the strength of this, that build that setup to how crazy things get, and then the fallout from that afterwards, and what happens to everybody, the breakdown of all the relationships, make this a really enjoyable film. It is darkly comic, but okay, given the language, the physical abuse, I know I must have shown parts of this to Emma because she's my big Marvel fan, and she's like,
okay,
she knows her Bucky when she sees him. But much younger than that, I don't think this is going to be for them. I was
younger than 16. No, I agree. And I even think at that point you really need to know your kiddo to decide whether it's appropriate for them or not.
I was traveling for work, and I got back in town yesterday, and I was texting my boss. I said, I got to prep for a podcast. We're talking about what I think is, one of a great film last year that was completely overlooked. And she said, well, what's that? And I sent her the link to I, Tonya. And it's because I don't think she was familiar with this movie. And
interesting.
Again, this is, after watching this again, I want to recommend this to anybody, particularly I think of our generation that is familiar with, or has a passing awareness of Tonya Harding. Everybody will remember that incident, and I think if you're aware of that, take the time to watch this, because you're going to have the background and context for who these people are. But as you said, we've got so many things visually in terms of filmmaking, the whole idea of unreliable narrators and everybody telling their own truth. As I've said things about, the role of women in sports and talent, all of those things, giving a blind eye to women being abused. There are so many things going on. This movie is so much more than I expected it to be when I thought, first saw it as, it's a quirky biopic. They're going to do a biopic, but they got to do something unconventional because the subject matter is already ridiculous. But to me, I'm going to give credit to Craig Gillespie and writer Steve Rogers, which is funny.
Executive producer Margot Robbie, by the way.
Yes.
She was the money behind this movie. That's a big thing to say as well.
Yes.
She deserves a lot of credit for bringing this thing out.
Yes. Truly, I think one of the overlooked films that, should have been nominated for more than just supporting actress. Not taking anything away from Allison Janney. Margot Robbie, that's stiff competition, but there are so many other things that make this a solid film to definitely put on people's must-watch list. Is this at the top of your flick chart? Is this going to be right up? Is it going to be right up on top there?
It's very high. It's a 5-star movie for me, and it is number 13 out of 195, which puts it above Boogie Nights and below The Matrix. I couldn't get it past The Matrix. I think. Yeah, and I mean, once you start getting up into these movies, it's really tough because I love all of them so much. But one thing that is also remarkable about its flick chart position for me is that it's the second highest trailer rewind movie that we've ever done, after The Lobster, which still sits up at number 5 for me. So that's a cool thing to think about, that even though it's 13 out of all my movies, that it's still the second best trailer rewind that we've done.
So it was sitting at number 68 to 355 when I came back and rewatched it this last time and re-ranked it, and it moved up quite a bit. Because I said, I think I'm appreciating this on more levels. So it's now at number 25. It is just under Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Which is at number 24. Tanya's at 25. So it's up there. What is it? 93%. Because I give it 4.5 stars. I think that, as I said, with the incident, things sort of, there's a little lull there. There's some things that, to quote Andy, I might have some quibbles with. I can't put my finger on it, but I think there's just a few little things, just little quibbles, but near perfect film that I think merits being this high because as I said, on multiple views, to be able to continue to appreciate it in different ways, to me shows the signs of just a truly great film.
And I think Tonya likes it too. She went to the press stuff with Margot Robbie. They were seen together with it, and I think, I don't think she is ever going to be vindicated for what she did. But I think this humanizes her and makes her more sympathetic than other accounts really could do for her. So I'm happy about that too.
Definitely. All right. Well, if you haven't already, please head over to iTunes and give us a rating and review. It helps other film fans discover us. And if you choose to support us on Patreon, you're joining a great community of film fans, including some that are really into film as art and some that just really enjoy entertaining movies. I mean, that I think is, we've got a nice mix of that, discussing the whole Marvel movie minute going on over there. There's some people that just love fun movies, and there's others that are really getting into the art of those movies. So we'd love to have you join our community. I want to take time to say special thanks to Pete Wright. We could not do this show without him. He takes time out of his busy schedule to edit this all together, to make us sound all nice, and put those audio clips right in where they should be. Thank you again, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
And JJ, thank you for hanging out tonight and talking about one of your favorite movies.
Yeah, see you soon, Steve.
Hondo.